one-week season.
OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes. We are back. Week 15, searching for ceiling. Man, it seems like just yesterday we were a month into the season and we were like, we have all this opportunity left ahead of us. Now, with 1 month remaining, let us hunt for that hidden upside. Without further ado, you know him, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Rich Hribar. How we doing today, dude?
We're doing great. Yeah, like you said, 4 full slates left. That's counting week 18, which is always kind of a weirder slate
Yeah.
in itself. But yeah, only 4 full ones, so we got to enjoy them. Although, that first week of the playoffs is always a fun week too.
Yeah. Small slate stuff is fun, but it's different. It's a different animal.
Yeah, it's
So
a different beast.
what we've been doing every week, other than Thanksgiving, really is the only other small slate that we've had anything like the playoffs. But we're hunting for ceiling, man. We know we have a good idea where the field is going this week. We have a pretty good idea where the field is not going. One of the most obvious spots on the week in the highest game total by more than a touchdown. It's the highest game total by more than a touchdown in that Bills and Lions game.
Yep.
Field really isn't going there. I mean, Jamar Chase is grabbing some ownership. We're seeing a little bit on Sam Laporta. We're seeing a little bit on Khalil Shakir, but outside of that, it's like the field's kind of neglecting this spot. So we're going to lead with that one.
Yeah.
How are you seeing this game this week?
Yeah, I mean, we've got the Bills who have scored 30 or more points in 7 straight games. Number 1 and number 2 teams in points per drive, right? So there's a reason this total is as high as it is. We're coming off of Josh Allen having a week where if you didn't have Josh Allen, like he shadow realmed you. I mean, I was on Darnold last week and getting almost 40 points for Sam Darnold, I felt bulletproof. Like I was like, oh my goodness, there's like a 4 because I do a show at Ray too on Sharp Football, and he's like, well, I'm not really on Darnold because like a good Darnold game is probably like 25 points. I can get by with that, and he ended up having 40, and it's like this is amazing. We talked about last week on the show here, coming off of Saquon potentially for a guy like Justin Jefferson and using that salary as potential leverage. You run Jordan Addison back, and like I thought bulletproof, like we're good. And then here comes Josh Allen coming in with his 55 fantasy points. Like, yeah, get on the board here. We got Khalil Shakir, who literally has 1 end zone target on the season, and he said, you know what? I don't need end zone targets. I'll just eat the golden mushroom from the 45-yard line and just run past everybody. What an amazing game, though. It was a ton of fun. Also in those games, too, lost in the context of those big shootouts is you had the defensive touchdown, the special teams touchdown, throw that game into the game mode, like the game environment that it got to. And that's what always happens in like those games, that defensive touchdown. Like we saw Broncos-Browns 2 weeks prior in the Monday night game. When you have those games, that's how the shootouts happen. Remember like the 100-point Rams Chiefs game from a couple years ago, the Goff game, like I think there's 3 defensive touchdowns in that game. Like, so those are how those game states get absolutely zany, is you have like the special teams or defensive touchdown, and that game got wild.
What was it, 2 or 3 years ago when the Dolphins and the Ravens put up like 100
opening kickoff, right?
Devin Duvernay, opening kickoff. Yeah. It's always we just need that spark. And that's what we talk about a lot at OWS, honestly, is like defensive tendencies, offensive tendencies, matchups, like play calling tendencies. All this stuff matters towards a game environment, but it's usually not the like igniting factor. It's typically like a play, an individual play. That's why we love Jamar Chase, right? That's why we love Lamar Jackson, right? Because like these individual sparks are typically what pushes a game environment to the what I call the oh shit mode, which is like all bets are off. We're going out. We need to like drive football. We need to score. We need to win. So that's what I'm looking for. There is one other game that has a lot of players that can send the game into the shadow realm, the oh shit mode that I call it. We'll cover that in a minute after we finish up this Bills and Lions game. The other side of the coin with this game is both of these defenses are top 8 in points allowed per drive. So the Lions are tied at second in points allowed per game at 18.0. The Bills are in 8th at just under 20. So this game, I think, has a much wider range of outcomes as far as how it could play out than I think the field is going to give credit for by just looking at the game total. like, yes, it probably has the best chances of like developing into a game that you had to have. But at the same time, like it has a extremely wide range of outcomes. We've had games with wide ranges of outcomes in recent weeks. Like look at the both Seattle and Arizona games. Those
Right.
games wide ranges of outcomes and they relatively flopped. So there is the potential. And then like beyond that, both of these offenses, while they're concentrated from like a who's going to be involved perspective, they're not necessarily concentrated from like consistently elite volume. Look at, from all the skill position players in this game, nobody from Amon Ra, from like everybody in this game, we could just, the list goes on and on. There's a lot of skill position players that are interesting here. Out of all of them, nobody has put up a 4x salary multiplier, their week 15 salary, more than twice this whole season. So there is this weird kind of catch 22 situation where like it very clearly has a ton of upside. It's a wide range of outcomes. The field's not going here. To me, that screams like I want to stack it up or kind of stay away. Like I'm not looking to this game for one-off selection. I want to be like all in for the game environment, or I kind of want to just like leave it alone. That's how I'm seeing it. What about yourself?
There's a couple of pieces I still like in isolation. I think if you wanted to play it without stacking it up, but I definitely do agree that there's an element here where this game, obviously, because the thing is, gamers are very fickle. What we just saw, right? Like we saw the Bills play that just a crazy game, and it's gonna be like, yeah, we gotta go right back to it, right? Like I think that happened literally after you reboot off the Dolphins Ravens game from a couple years ago. I believe like two of doubles were played for like a month after that.
Yeah.
Like it literally
With the
everyone was
price
just
increase, like it didn't matter. Like,
everyone was just like, dude, we just gotta keep playing two of doubles. Like, right? Like that just happened. So I think we're gonna see Josh Allen actually come in with higher ownership than maybe some early stuff shows because he had 55 fantasy points and gamers will be like, I need those. And I'm gonna find a way to get Josh Allen in my lineup. I feel like that's
yeah.
going to happen. I do think Josh Allen has a path here to a productive day on the ground, especially. But you brought up the matchup. He's literally trading though the defense that was 31st in passing points allowed per attempt for the team that's first, the
Yeah.
Detroit Lions. So it's like a night and day flip of opponent. I do think he's going to be able to run the ball in this game, though. And we've seen this happen 2 years in a row now. Last year, a lot of people just credit it for the switch to Joe Brady, where his rushing ramped up to close the end of last season. But then we saw the same thing happening in this year, where weeks 1 through 9, he wasn't running. 23 yards per game, one game of 50 rushing yards. And then since then, 55, 58, 18, 82. He's got 33 rushing attempts the past month after just 47 the opening 9 games. And what has Aaron Glenn done consistently his 3 years in Detroit? He plays aggressive man-to-man defense, which allows quarterbacks to run. They're 26th in rushing yards allowed per game to quarterbacks right now in 2024. The previous 2 years, they were 30th and 32nd in those departments. So no team plays more man coverage than them. I still think they'll be aggressive and play a lot of man coverage here because I don't think they fear the Bills wide receivers. I genuinely don't.
Yeah.
So I think that Aaron Glenn is going to play aggressive. So I think you got a path for rushing volume through Josh Allen still here too, which always is like the one thing he carries. But outside of the Josh Allen, though, I don't think there's a bill I really like. Where last week I was on Amari,
Yeah,
and
I was too.
but I don't think there's another bill that I like, especially with Kincaid and Coleman coming back this week. I think it's Allen a la carte if you're going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there are some interesting splits with Keon Coleman versus man coverage.
Yeah.
He has performed much, much better against man coverage in his short career. But again, this was all prior to kind of Amari Cooper. And he did have that one game, like in Amari Cooper's first game. But yeah, like the volume is probably not going to be there. We also like look at Josh Allen and what he's done recently. The dude has set an NFL record in consecutive weeks. Like he is playing some ball. Like he was the first quarterback in NFL history to run one, catch one, throw one. And then he was the first quarterback in NFL history last week to rush for 3 touchdowns and throw for 3 touchdowns. So like, while that is super impressive in and of itself, like what are the chances he's setting another NFL record this week kind of discussion? Anyway, while I like this game, the field isn't going here. I think I want to be stacking it up. I think you can do so from each quarterback. Are you interested at all in Jared Goff here?
I think more so, to be honest. Well, the Lions' offense in general, I believe, is structurally built to combat what Shane McDermott does defensively. I mean, the Bills are a passive defense. They try not to give up big plays. They have really bad rushing metrics. They allow the highest rate of explosive runs to running backs. They're bottom 5 in yards allowed before contact to running backs. They want to flow things to the middle of the field, and that's everything the line. I think there's a reason why the Rams had success against the Bills. They're a team that does those things. And I think the Lions do it at a better version, a heightened version of where the Rams do it. So I do think structurally the Lions are going to move the football in this game. Now, you always have the Goff wild card factor, right? Like even this year, Goff has been very volatile from a fantasy stance. More so than his top downs. I wrote a couple times in the worksheet this year that it reminds me of the previous 2 Tua seasons where his top down metrics are all like top 3 in the league. But from a fantasy stance, he has a QB1 game and then has like 3 games where he's like QB18, QB20, QB23, then has a QB1 game again. He does that because the rushing touchdowns obviously are such a big part of this. And that's the other component is if the Bills can't stop the run here, I mean, they're facing a team that leads the Detroit backfield's number 1 in the NFL in opportunities per game. They're number 1 in yardage per game. Buffalo's 27th in yardage, total yards allowed to running backs. This is a game where the Lions will acquiesce. And they'll give you all the David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs you want. So like those guys I think are more intriguing. I've been kind of tracking ownership on those guys. What makes those guys really interesting this year versus last year? It was kind of clear last year David Montgomery was a touchdown or bust fantasy asset. Well, this year he's got 32 catches, 2 fewer than Jahmyr Gibbs. Like he's actually they're literally used interchangeably this year. It's just that Gibbs is a little bit more efficient. They each have 212 touches on the dot. They each have 12 touchdowns on the dot. They said their catches are dead even basically. So I kind of want to track ownership here. I don't think we can do the double thing still, but I'm interested still in these guys. And then I'll save it because I've been talking so much, but I do think Amon-Ra's in a great spot too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there a path to stacking up some Lions? Like pick a running back with Amon-Ra or pick a running back with Jahmyr Gibbs, and then basically instead of using Jared Goff, bringing it back with Josh Allen here.
I think so, because I mean, I do think if you get that run out, then you're probably getting the game environment where Josh Allen has to be a little more hair on fire, right? And like last week was, and you don't have to do the whack-a-mole game where maybe even the stacking partner doesn't get there, right? I mean, they're cheap enough. I guess if you got a touchdown from any of those guys, you'd be really happy. But I definitely believe that's in the range of outcomes.
I dig it, man. Anything else to add before we head on over to the Dolphins?
No, yes, it's going to be the popular game, but yeah, I do want to get to the Dolphins game too as well for I think the same reasons you.
Yeah, the way I'm looking at this game is Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith, Devon Achane, Nico Collins, Joe Mixon. Like, stop me when there's not an elite playmaker. Like, there's just so many. Even Tank Dell, like he hasn't really done it this year, but like last year he was a per target efficiency monster. There's a lot of players in this game that can give that ignition, can give that spark to where, and effectively, this is a must-win game for the Dolphins. They're 2 games down from a playoff spot. They have 4 games left. They have to win this week. Similar story for the Texans. They're 2 games up for the AFC South division on the Colts, and they are right at 8-5 with 3 other AFC teams. So it is an extremely tight playoff picture. These teams both need a win. They have all this talent that can provide that spark. Jalen Petrie is out for the Texans. Like the Texans are allowing a lot of deep passing. There's so much in this game that I really, really like. Talk to me a little bit about it. How are you seeing the spot?
Well, I think this game starts here from a game theory perspective. This is the one. It's an early kick. You've got star power. It's no weather concerns, obviously playing in indoors. So like this has potential to rival the first game. Is there probably more fragility to this game than the Lions Bills game? I would say, yeah, it's a road Dolphins game. The Texans have been an offense, I think, that has underwhelmed us at points, but I still think if you're playing it from like a single entry stance, like if you hit, you're going to hit big in this game, and it's going to ride, and it's the upside of this game rivals the later game if it does hit. So that's what makes it interesting. Also, I think from the Dolphins' perspective, since they've gotten Tua back, a couple things have happened. Well, one, this team can't run the ball. Yeah. They're dead last in the NFL in EPA per rush since Tua's come back, and they're now 8% over pass rate expectations over that span. They've really just changed the rushing game for and calibrated to like a short passing game. That's why Achane and Jonnu have like increased usage this year, because they've adjusted. They go, we can't line up and run the football. Well, we'll get these guys the ball near the line of scrimmage in the quick pass game. But because they're throwing the ball more, it's now they've opened up like better game environments for their games, because they're not just running the ball. So you look at some of these competent teams they've played, they gave up 28 points to the Cardinals, a 55-point game. They gave up 30 points to the Bills, a 57-point game. Then they had a meandering game against the Rams. That was the Monday night game. That's probably the one that was a letdown. But then they play the Raiders and Patriots, who really don't score, so it's not a big deal. They do hang they hang 34 in both of those games, but they don't get the bounce back from those other offenses. Then they come back and give up 30 to the Packers. They give up 26 to the Jets. Like, they're playing in better game environments for fantasy football points because they can't run the football, and better pass game environment stuff. So now we have an environment where, did the Texans use this bye to do some self-scouting? Please, Lord.
Please, God.
Please, Lord, let it be a thing, because this would be a spot where no one's going to play CJ Stroud. Hell, I might not even be there, but like the Texans are probably in a position to throw the football more in this game. So please do some self-scouting.
Yeah, and especially early downs in the first half would be great. Bobby Slowick, hope you're listening. The number of times that this team is getting forced into third and long situations, particularly in the first half of games, is maddening. You mentioned the increased pass rates for the Dolphins. They rank second in the league since Tua came back in pass rate over expectation. This team is, as you mentioned, they are transitioning how they are approaching trying to win football games. We talked a lot early in the season. We're like, is this fake sharp Mike McDaniel? What is going on here? But things are coming together. He's figuring things out, and he is kind of taking what has worked, what has not worked, and tailoring his offense to maximize the skill that he has on the field. That's why Jonnu Smith has had 4 amazing games in a row. That's why Devon Achane continues to produce through the air, because he's utilized through the air as an extension of the run, like you mentioned. So we also had like the rebirth of Tyreek Hill last week, 14 targets. We saw Jalen Waddle see 12 targets against a team that utilized a ton of cover 4. We were kind of like, I mentioned in 2 different spots last week that I thought it was just Jonnu Smith, because he continued to lead the team in underlying metrics against too high. But this week they get an opponent in the Texans that is right around league average in too high, single high in most of these coverage metrics that we look at. So there is significant upside in Tyreek Hill without Jalen Petrie. There is significant upside in Jonnu Smith, in Devon Achane. I am less inclined to believe that Jalen Waddle continues seeing double-digit looks on a weekly basis. He's probably the one that I would leave out from like potential Tua doubles here. Are you interested in Tua doubles? You mentioned CJ Stroud. What about Tua side?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because the thing about Tua that always makes him fun is that you can play Achane in the stack with him. You know, that you don't have to ignore the running back, whereas you're not going to play Mixon and Stroud. You're not going to do that. That's what makes the 2 angle fun, is that you don't have to. I will say I've tinkered with building lineups already around this game, and it is hard to successfully build around the slate with Jonnu, just because of the way the slate is. Yeah. It's a little trickier to kind of get to some of the other pieces. Like Jonnu almost forces you to take a bad play somewhere else, or like a more flimsier play, not a bad play, but like, you know, a little flimsier play on this slate, because this slate in general only has Jonnu, Trey McBride, and Travis Kelce as pay up tight ends
up top. Yeah.
And so like, I just think we're going to see a lot of the field probably just play the Brenton Stranges, the Stone Smarts, maybe even Jake Ferguson's of the world, because they want to get to because it's a really good running back slate too. Like, it's it's a great running back slate. A lot of running backs in really good spots. So when you put Jonnu in, I have found that it's a little restrictive trying to get to some of the other pieces outside of this game. So it does make it a little tough, but you can do it with Achane and Tyreek, and then you can do it with Nico Collins, who we talked about the Dolphins, like, inversely playing in some of these games, like, because their top-down metrics look good because through the first 6 weeks of the season when Tua was out, they weren't doing anything offensively. So they were just in game environments that sucked. So their defensive metrics looked good because they were facing bad quarterbacks, also not scoring on offense, and the games are bad. But now that they've started to play in these high-scoring games, we've seen wide receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr. had 100 yards and a touchdown against them. Puka, 9 for 98. Both Jets guys go for 100 yards last week. They're giving up big games. And Nico Collins has arguably been the best wide receiver in fantasy football this year when he's played. So you have upside guys that aren't even on the Dolphins side too in this game. That's what makes it so intriguing, because you have a path for this game to rival the late game. And it's the early kick. And if this game pops, how to play the late slate. That's what we talked about last week when the chalk was all late. Those are the best kind of slates.
Yeah, 100%. I really like messing around with Tua doubles, Devon Achane and Tyreek Hill, and bringing it back with Nico Collins. It's a lot of salary, so we're talking like Stone Smarts of the world, tight end. We might discuss that a little bit. You mentioned that Nico Collins is probably the top fantasy wide receiver when healthy this year. I think Jamar Chase probably has the only claim to talk about that. Let's talk about that game real quick. That's a very interesting spot because we know this Bengals team is just trying to pass their way to the end of the season, like not necessarily even to the postseason. They need to win out and they need a lot of help. But they're not mathematically eliminated just yet. But we know, they're averaging 44 pass attempts per game over the last 3. They are leading the league in pass rate over expectation. Like, all of this is aligning that they are very clearly, particularly after they lost Zach Moss, like they're just running from 11 personnel. Actually, that's an interesting point too, because after their week 12 bye, they came out and ran 41% 12 personnel in consecutive games. What do you make of that? Did you catch that in the
that's how they tried earlier in the year too to play? When Eric All was like, people were chasing those like couple targets a game, but they were flipping basically Eric All and Gesicki, and they've done that now with Tanner Hudson, where one guy plays in 12 personnel, the other guy plays in 11 personnel. So like they're kind of back to doing that in some of their success.
With this spot against an opponent that is allowing the fewest pass yards per game, the second or third fewest total, I think it's the second fewest total yards per game, but like the 8th most points per game. Like, this is a really weird dynamic for the Titans defense. They're also getting T'Vondre Sweat, who is now off the injury report. He is healthy after being on it the previous 2 weeks. He missed one game. He played last week after not practicing at all the entire week. What do you make of this spot in this matchup? Like, is there upside here?
Yeah, always with the Bengals, especially this version. I think we were in a couple weeks ago too, where Burrow wasn't tracking to be popular against the Steelers. And, definitely some game environment helped him out, maybe more than here. But like, it's like, you look at Burrow and where he's been delivering in terms of his salary. He's got 250 yards and 3 touchdowns or more in 5 straight games. The first quarterback to do that since 2012. He's got 303 in his last 4. First quarterback to do that since 2018. He's just delivering on his salary so heavily through the touchdown department. And although the Titans aren't giving up a lot of yards to quarterbacks, they are giving a lot of touchdowns. That's where those points are coming from. They're 30th in the league since the week 5 in touchdown rate allowed to quarterbacks. They've allowed multiple passing touchdowns in 6 of their past 9 games. So that's kind of where that's coming from. To me, it's always if Burrow, who's been the hottest fantasy quarterback, he's been hotter than Josh Allen. I know these last 2 weeks of Josh Allen have been incredible. But literally, when you like those, you go back 4 or 5 games now, a month plus, Burrow's been the hottest fantasy quarterback in terms of consistency and upside. So if he's going to track to be under-owned, like, you've got to be interested.
Yeah, we're talking 25.26 DK points or more in every game. He's hit 28.56 or more in 4 of 5. So that's a 4x salary multiplier. He's done it in 4 of 5 games. And obviously, Jamar Chase is just on this torrid stretch. When we look at the Titans defense, they're playing almost 60% combined cover 3 and cover 4. When you look at those splits, like, it's Jamar Chase by a metric mile. on this team. He has almost 3 times as many yards as the next closest player against cover 3 and cover 4 this season. So I really like Joe Burrow with Jamar Chase. I really like Joe Burrow with Chase Brown and Jamar Chase. Chase Brown, since Zach Moss went
another
down,
guy you can play with the quarterback.
Yeah, he's averaging 6.8 targets per game since Zach Moss was lost. He's averaging almost 25 running back opportunities per game. He's put up 19 DK points or more in all 5 of the last games. So yeah, there's a lot of upside here. This offense is super concentrated. You have the players that can do it on their own. You have the structure of the offense where we know they're passing. I think there's a lot to like from Joe Burrow this week as well. Love that shout.
Yep.
Do we need in the same vein, do we need the Titans to be pushing it all? Because that could be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't. The thing is, it's tough to say because we haven't seen it from the Bengals, right? Like, I think the Browns game was the last game that was like kind of neutral game script for them. Because even Monday night against the Cowboys, they still needed to do what they did.
Yeah.
We just haven't. So we haven't really seen this Bengals for a while. Well, I guess now Raiders game, they still he threw 5 touchdowns, right? The Raiders game would be like the example, and he still threw 5 touchdowns in that game. So yeah. So I don't think so. I do think. I mean, I do think that Ridley still is in play as a bring back if you want him to, just because the opportunity and like again on Monday, like they're just dudes buck naked, and like the Bengals are just leaving guys open repeatedly. So I do think he's in play. Obviously, you know what you're signing up for with Ridley, though. So
yeah,
but his price and opportunity are palatable.
Yeah,
on this
and
particular slate.
Ridley has put up a 4x salary multiplier in 3 of 13 games, so right around 25%, which is above average due to this tight pricing this season. Like in years past, we're like, okay, these players are priced to put up about a 4x salary multiplier about 25% of the time. That's way down this year. You look at the Lions, like again, nobody's done it more than twice. So yeah, he's done it 3 times in 13 games. You're going to need that splashy play type stuff, but if that happens, it directly correlates to some increased pass volume for the Bengals. Any interest in Tajay Spears if Pollard is out? He has not practiced yet this week.
Yeah, it's tough to say just because we've seen Pollard do this like four times already this year, where he doesn't practice till Friday, and then because he's had such a high workload, and Brian Callahan's talked about it so much, but I mean, he would have to be just ruled out for us to explore it.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I think is the issue here with Pollard is it's an ankle. There's certain injuries that we don't want to see on the injury report for different positions. For like pass catchers and like wide receivers and tight ends, it's hamstring. Dave Njoku, who has a hamstring this week, and for running backs, it's ankle. For the wide receivers and tight ends, it's because that soft tissue is charged with going from stationary to full on sprint 30 to 40 times a game, depending on how many routes they're in. So that's a difficult ask for that major muscle group in your leg when you're trying to do that 30, 40 times. For running backs, they're asked to change direction so often. And look at all the snaps, they're on the field. They're either pass protecting, where they're changing direction and reacting, or they're trying to hit the hole and they're reacting and changing direction. So an ankle for a running back is a bad news Bears situation. So that's the only thing that potentially, but on the other side of that discussion, like Tony Pollard hasn't necessarily lit the world on fire this season, and he's had 5 games where he has operated in an 80% plus snap rate role. So I don't know. I don't think I will go to Tajay Spears.
I mean, this slate just has so many running back plays.
Yeah, at all prices too.
Yes,
we're going to talk about one. I'll save it. We're going to talk about 2 running backs in the same game that are way underpriced relative to their matchup and their expected role here. We'll get to them here shortly. Don't want to spoil. Anything else to add from this game?
No. I think it's pretty clear. You just got you do a Burrow stacks, and you do or don't have to add Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's move to that game that I just alluded to. And for those wondering, it's a gross one, but it's the Cowboys and the Panthers. 2 backfields that are very different. Well, one's kind of different, but kind of the same. With Chuba Hubbard expected to be a legitimate workhorse. We have Rico Dowdle on the other side, who over his last 3 games is being utilized as like a true lead back. You look at his opportunities and his snaps to start the season before the last 3 games. The dude had 0 games over 51% of the offensive snaps. So like he just was not being utilized as even he had 1 game over 51%, and it was the game that Zeke was withheld due to the discipline stuff. So yeah, like this spot, we have both of these defenses are bottom 5 in every metric that you look at against the run. And we have 2 potential like workhorse situations. How interested are you in Chuba Hubbard at 6,500 and Rico Dowdle at 6,100?
Yeah, I think like the field, I think Hubbard's going to be the most popular play this weekend based on salary and opportunity. And, not only did Jonathan Brooks get hurt, we're still without Miles Sanders, and Raheem Blackshear got hurt. It looks like
Yeah, he did.
Mike Boone's going to be the backup
The
running
Boone.
back. And he had 30 touches last week. And not only that, we've seen Chuba Hubbard now in 2 of the past 3 games get over on volume against teams like the Chiefs and Eagles. Now he's facing the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Like pretty big difference, right? Like, so he's a home favorite. This is the first time in 34 games the Panthers have been favored. like
what a world.
Yeah. So like we've got that going for us too. We're even getting him as a home favorite. So, and Dallas, yeah, they've even, not only are they bad against the run from a metric stance, they've also allowed 16 touchdowns to running backs, which is tied for the second most in the league. So it's just a great spot, I think, for volume. Everything aligns for Hubbard to be a guy that is just a safe, like volume play with upside as too. He is a guy that has 5 20 PPR point games. So you're getting just a perfect blend. Dowdle is interesting if he's going to be like under-owned or as like a tournament player or like a pivot off of this game, right? Because if you just swing the other way, maybe if the game script go in favor, you have some plays that go in Dallas's favor. I mean, they can still rush the passer. So then you play the opposite end. It's like, well, what if Dallas gets ahead? Because we've seen in these 3 neutral game scripts Dallas has had these last 3 weeks, use 84.6% of the backfield opportunities, 86% of the backfield opportunities, 82.6% of the backfield opportunities in those games. 20, 22, 25, 19 touches. So yeah, and Carolina consistently been bad against the run too, because they've been better against the pass of late.
Yeah,
which is interesting, but they've still been just as bad against the run. So Dowdle would be the guy to still target, I think, more so than Lamb, because I don't know if anyone will get the Lamb, but I think Dowdle's pretty clear, which is funny because you have the dueling running backs, which almost never is a thing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we're expecting a lot of ownership on Chuba Hubbard. I mean, he's projecting for like 30 to 35%, depending on where he looks. So he's going to be owned. But I really like adding Dowdle to the same roster. This just goes against like our DFS DNA. We don't like doing that, right? But this game has paths to just kind of staying close. I mean, look at the Panthers. They have over their last 5 games. They have all been 1-score games. 23-22 to New Orleans in week 9, 20-17 against the Giants in week 10, Kansas City 27-30, Tampa Bay 23-26, and then Philly 16-22. This team is just playing these tight game environments. And I think that has a lot to do with like the improved play from Bryce Young, but also like Dave Canales he knows that he can't just go out and outscore teams. Like she's just kind of playing to the game environment. So I think this game stays close, or it's likeliest to stay close. And I think both of these running backs have a path to like some pretty significant point per dollar upside and together. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And it gets you kind of, I think, again, we're going to see the field mostly like looking to play one running back above 7K with one running back below 7K. That's kind of like just our standard this season based on how salaries worked out. So that kind of gets you away from that, gives you a little bit of extra salary to work with as well. Anything else to add from this kind of gross on paper, but kind of interesting game?
Yeah, no, that's how I see it too.
All right. I know you're probably itching to talk about Baker. Am I right?
No, not really.
Oh, okay.
Are you?
Maybe we'll see if we have time to get there. I'll throw it to you though. I picked out like 3 or 4 game environments. I want to hear, are there any other that you're looking at that are interesting this week?
Yeah, definitely like those. The other, well, four, because this is a slate where I think it's split 6 and 4, right? Or we have 6. How many 4 o'clock games do we have? It's definitely 5, right?
I
One, two,
think it's
three. It's 5. It's
5.
5.
Yeah.
So we have a nice split slate. So we got those late games. Cardinals, Patriots, definitely some interesting pieces here and trying to build around this. I think there are a lot of ways to build around this game. You and I have been critical of this Arizona passing game for a large part of the season, but this is a game environment that sets up for them to operate their passing game through their running game. Like when they're playing complementary football is when this passing game works. And then just from a schedule stance, since week 5, Kyler Murray has faced the 49ers, Packers, Chargers, Dolphins, Bears, Jets, Seahawks twice, and Vikings in a row. Not one of those teams is in the back half of the league in passing points allowed per attempt. The Patriots are 27th. So we probably are going to get like a front running Kyler game, which is on the board. I think people will get the Kyler. But I do want to talk about James Conner and then a potential bring back in this game. I think it's also a good spot for James Conner. And the last 3 wins the Cardinals have had at home, he's had 21 touches for 152 yards, 21 touches for 119 yards, 17 touches for 113. New England's been really bad against running backs all year. They're 24th in rushing points allowed per game. So Conner definitely stands out too, because if Kyler's getting there, it's probably through Conner playing well. Because again, when this passing game's been good, it's when the running game is really good. And then I do think there's a bring back in this game that's pretty gross and not very exciting in Demario Douglas, because of the potential game environment to where I expect the Patriots to have to throw, and then just the structure of defense that the Cardinals run is going to push stuff to Demario Douglas. We've seen when Drake May's on the field, he's been targeted on a team high 23% of his routes. Well, that goes up to 26% against zone coverage with Drake May in the game. Arizona, like I said, inherently the structure of their defense funnels stuff to slot receivers. That's why Jackson Smith and Jigba has been playable in 2 of the past 4 games against them. It's why we got some other slot guys against them, and they're 26th in touchdown rate. That's the thing with Demario Douglas. You can never bank on the touchdown, but 27th in yards per target, 28th in points allowed to slot receivers. But he's cheap enough, I think, on DraftKings particularly, that you might not need a touchdown for him to provide value for you, even as a one-off or as a mini, where if you just played Conner and Douglas, what else you can get to on the slate. Because I think, like you said, we're going to see a lot of gamers play the 7K running back, under 7K running back. But underneath like 5K receivers, there's not a lot. And I do think he is one of them that maybe allows you to play 2 over 7K running backs or a better receiver too. If you're playing like these Tyreek teams or Nico Collins, like we talked about, if you want to play Nico and Tyreek in a lineup together, you need one of these types of players. And I do think he's one of them.
I think that's fair. I got nothing to poke holes in that. Again, it's thin from the sense of we want these guys priced down here to have clear access to 20-25 fantasy points. He's done that just once all season. But like you said, schematically and how we expect this game environment to go, I think it's totally fine as kind of a make one of these top stacks fit and work. Because we're talking about like a Bengals double, you're sinking a lot of salary. A Miami, a Houston game environment bet, you're sinking a lot of salary. Even if you're going to the Bills and Lions, you're sinking a lot of salary. So don't mind that one bit. And the state of player salary and pricing at wide receiver this year has been a difficult nut to crack. What we're seeing is a lot of guys that are like typically like thought of as value, like the guys below 5K, don't necessarily have the ceiling that we're looking for in GPPs. So that has led to a large chunk of ownership in this mid range, which is where the players are priced that have the upside. Like we're Jerry Jeudy, 6,200.
We did Ridley,
Malik Neighbors, Ridley. Yeah, we have all these guys in this range. Zay Flowers at 6K. Josh Downs is he's priced below 5K, isn't he? Like 40.
Yeah, he's 5-1 on DraftKings.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one as well against the Broncos. Yeah, just a macro discussion on kind of the state of salary this year.
That's how it's been this year. Yeah. I mean, is there any interest in Marv where he's priced this week in that game?
I think a little bit more this week than the previous couple weeks when his salary was coming down. I was I wasn't on him. But I think this week, like he's seen 20 targets over the last 2 weeks. And like you mentioned, he gets this much better like on paper matchup.
Because we've already seen the Christian Gonzalez stuff floated around, but I always remind people too when we do cornerback wide receiver stuff, like the Patriots are a man heavy team, but it's 40% of passing snaps. Like that's a lot of man coverage in today's NFL.
Mm-hmm.
So figure in a typical NFL game, let's just say the number of routes the receivers runs is in the 30 to 35 range.
Mm-hmm.
If the Patriots are playing man coverage and they're using Christian Gonzalez to shadow Marvin Harrison Jr., we're still talking like 16 routes in a game. Like, I mean, are we going to let a super small sample like that like dictate something from a top-down play that is objectively strong? Because even with Christian Gonzalez on the field, the Patriots are allowing 9.4 yards per target to opposing wide receiver ones. That's 26th in the league. They're also 23rd in points allowed per game to outside receivers. So I don't want to get caught up in the weeds of the wide receiver cornerback stuff because you've already seen it floated around there. Like Christian Gonzalez is going to shadow Marvin Harrison Jr. So like maybe that's just another element we can attack with it.
Yeah, just play. Who? No, never mind. I won't even say it. Disregard. That long Michael Wilson touchdown
scores because there's no good tight ends on the slate.
Yeah, this is it, man. What it was like on their first possession last week, the Michael Wilson touchdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they just completely flopped after that. But yeah, Michael Wilson, man. Anyway, play some Greg Dortch.
Because we've seen when this team is behind outside of that fourth quarter in Miami, like we've talked about it all year, like this passing game, when it structurally has to funnel, because look at Kyler on 3rd and long this year. Like they're terrible. They're terrible on 3rd and long. Like when this offense is in a state where they have to throw and everyone knows they're throwing, it's a house of cards.
Yeah.
But this is a game environment where they're going to be probably front running, and the passing game's will probably look a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, probably the last opportunity we saw this team in that game script was against the Jets in Week 10. Kyler Murray put up 28.75 fantasy points. What did Marvin Harrison do? He only saw 5 targets, but 1 touchdown. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't hate it. Hit me with another game environment. We'll get one more, and then we'll get our out the doorsy stuff.
I don't know. Did you want to do Bucks? Do you have any thoughts on the Steelers stuff, like Steelers Eagles?
Let's do the Bucks, man. Let's
Bucks,
do the
Chargers.
Bucks. Yeah, I think we need to talk about that because Justin Herbert is currently projecting to be the top owned quarterback on the slate, which I would strongly urge against.
Yes.
That said, I do think that Baker Mayfield has viability here. We look at player pricing, like Baker's at 6'4", and you're not paying too much more for Joe Burrow at 7'3". So like, to me, it's like apples and oranges. I would much rather go there, but I think there is some upside with the Bucks passing attack. We've seen the reason why is like, we know that this team breeds like top game environments. We know that they're adept at scoring points. We know that they give up a lot of points. We know that they're a pass funnel. And now we have a Chargers offense on the other side, hoping to get Ladd McConkey back. He's been limited this week, but they have been much more pass heavy with really no ability to run the football without J.K. Dobbins. Gus Edwards, the bowling ball, is just he rolls forward for 3 yards, and that's it. Like, that's what you get with Gus Edwards. Kimani Vidal has not been trusted. He's not the best pass blocker, so he has not been trusted with the snaps. So it's like this team just kind of has to pass. So now we have like a pass heavier offense in the Chargers, pass funnel defense in the Bucks, and a Buccaneers team that we know is going to be throwing the football as well. Even with this Chargers defense, I've kind of been skeptical with them all season about how well they had played up until like the midway point in the season. But now we've seen them give up 27 to the Bengals, 30 to the Ravens. This team has shown a little bit of cracks against more like capable offenses. That's my pitch. It's an elevator pitch. I don't really have strong feelings with Baker because to me, I'd rather just like pay up for Burrow or pay down for Tua.
Yeah.
Even. But yeah, Mike Evans is there. That's a thing. Any feelings either way here?
Yeah, I still like Evans in this spot. I think people will look at maybe the McMillan stuff, but not completely correlate it that it came with an outlier game for Evans in terms of target opportunity, especially since he's come back. So maybe we'll overweight that. But I mean, Chargers against outside receivers and lead wide receivers have struggled even through like their best patches. So I still think Evans is flying a little bit underpriced price based on like what I think his actual true opportunity looks like without Chris Godwin. It's weird because the 3 games he's been back, he was definitely going to play more in the Giants game and then didn't because it was a blowout. Then we saw the Carolina game, exactly what we wanted in a tight game. And then last week, kind of McMillan cashed in the 2 kind of freebie touchdowns, and we didn't see like a high Evans game. So like I still don't think we've seen like the full run out to where I think we're like stability wise, where he's going to be consistently getting 25 to 30% of the team targets, like getting targeted on 25% plus of his routes. I still believe that's going to happen more often than not, which makes him interesting because we always know he has that touchdown equity too. So I'm always monitoring him.
And the Chargers, I mean, they have been playing in some extremely tight games of late.
That's Harbaugh, baby.
That's Harbaugh. It's that smash mouth football, and I mean, it's worked to the point they're 8-5 and in control of their playoff destiny. But I mean, 17-19 to the Chiefs, 17-13 to the Falcons, 23-30 to the Ravens, 34-27. These are all like 1 possession games, so very much in the like
because they don't turn the ball over. That's and as much as we get on things like analytically, like if a run first head coach or whatever, but like if you don't turn the ball over in the NFL, you always are drawing live. It's just that is something that I think will never change throughout all the iterations of football. And as much as the meta changes, if you turn the ball over, you're probably going to have a good chance to lose. If you don't, you're in a position to win. Like that's always a good thing to be tried and true.
Yeah, Titans versus Chargers, like the 2 extremes there.
Yeah, we had it a couple weeks ago.
I know, dude. I know. We have some time to cover another game, and is there another spot that you're looking for upside here?
Well, we have a few. I think that are just like because we have a lot of like big spreads, but I think some of those spreads, or we could do Colts Broncos if you want, maybe to talk upside up because like Ravens are in a spot where they're huge favorites, and then the Commanders are another team that are huge favorites. That I believe like like pieces like. I don't know. Like right now, people are going to really get does Brian Robinson Jr. go overlooked on this slate because of Chuba Hubbard and like because remember, there's no Austin Eckler, and Brian Robinson has 2 RB1 scoring weeks this season, and they're both weeks without Austin Eckler, and he completely dominated the backfield until the 4th quarter last game. Yeah. Chris Rodriguez then he had 1 touch through 3 quarters, and then Brian Robinson Jr. played 2 snaps in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, so, Jeremy McNichols mixed in for 2 opportunities on their second possession, but this team was up 3 scores in the 1st quarter.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he's another guy too coming out of the bye. We haven't seen him really be healthy the front half of the year. Is he healthier? It's just a great spot for him indoors. Like we know him. So I don't know if he ends up going low. I haven't really looked at projected ownership, but I would assume with Dowdle and Hubbard and guys in that price range drawing a little more steam that maybe it just pulls away from him.
Yeah, we at OWS we have him at like 6 to 7%.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which compared to Rico at like 17 and Chuba 30 to 35.
That's interesting because I mean, obviously the Saints are terrible against the run.
Yeah. And I really like that pocket at running back this week. Like very clearly we can pay up for Derrick Henry. But he's a yardage and touchdown back, and if he's not getting those touchdowns.
And we have Connor, like I said, too. Like, yeah, wow, there's a couple pivots there.
Yeah, that's an interesting pricing range. I've been messing around with rosters with all 3 of those guys, like Chuba, Brian Robinson, and Rico. The field probably just isn't constructing their rosters that way. But yeah, I think all 3, and you can add James Conner to that discussion too, right? In that same pricing tier, are pretty interesting this week for their matchup, their upside, their involvement in the offense, and their expected role here. Real quick, let's really quickly touch on the Browns. They're playing the Chiefs. The Chiefs have been like bend but don't break on defense. That's kind of their MO. But on the other side of that coin, we have James Winston, who's attempted 41 passes or more in 5 of 6 games as the starter. And we have David Njoku, who picked up the hamstring injury. I mentioned earlier we wanted to quickly mention him. If David Njoku is out, who is seeing all these short to intermediate targets, what to you does that open up Elijah Moore for heavier volume, or how do you see that playing out here when we kind of know that the Browns are going to be passing?
Yeah, this game also is one of the few that have like we're going to have to wait till Sunday morning on weather stuff. This is one of them that is projected to have high winds and like kind of be gross. I mean, I'm actually like 20 minutes from the stadium. It's just real cold here right now, but I know projected for this weekend, it's not supposed to be like the greatest, a little bit of weather. So we'll have to watch that into Sunday. But obviously, if we were going to have like a clean environment, this would be a spot where you're going to get 40 dropbacks out of Jameis Winston for sure. It's just, do we get like a more of a, because the Chiefs are playing like these games, they're almost more Quagmire-ish. Like they're playing just gross games. Like you kind of like the Chargers that we talked about. Like that's kind of like what the Chiefs are trying to do. It's just that they have turned it over a little bit more. They're not playing nearly as good offensive line play than the Chargers get either. And this defense has gotten a little leaky due to the number of injuries. So we do get clean environment. I do think Jameis is interesting in the passing game. We saw when Njoku missed 3 games earlier this season. Now, grain of salt, this was the Deshaun Watson version of the Cleveland Browns. But like Jordan Akins wasn't involved. Like he wasn't involved from like an opportunity stance like David Njoku. He was only on the field for 52%. He had one game with 74% and then 40% of the dropbacks. You know, he wasn't like utilized as a full-time player. And Cleveland has already said they're going to use tight end by committee. So that just to me with Cedric Tillman coming back means that is if they're throwing, it's these 3 receivers, right? Cedric Tillman also, we played him for like a 3-week stretch and like we're into him. And he was playing well. And now he's kind of been forgotten because Jerry Jeudy has taken off with this opportunity. But Cedric Tillman had really good man coverage splits with Jameis Winston before he got hurt. So is he just like a guy that's out of sight, out of mind, and like in a good spot coming out of this, concussion and in a good spot?
I think so. I think Jeudy and Tillman are both very interesting. I think that Elijah Moore could pick up some of that underneath volume that David Njoku had been seeing. But you look at like, since Jameis Winston took over under center, it had been a relatively like 4-way even split and like underlying metrics. It's like Jerry Jeudy was leading the way with 0.21 targets per route run. And it's like Tillman was at 0.20. David Njoku was at like 0.20. So all 4 of these guys had kind of been utilized, kind of just trading off like weeks of heavy utilization. And then you look at the red zone utilization. This is where it gets really interesting for me because David Njoku had seen 7 end zone targets over the last 5 games. You compare that to like the 1 of Jerry Jeudy. So if David Njoku is out, how does this team function in the red zone? Do they just flop, or do we start seeing like the big-bodied guy who's probably Cedric Tillman? Do we see him pick up some look? So I think both Jeudy and Tillman are especially interesting. I don't like the short area usage of Elijah Moore paired with a low red zone role. That's kind of what offset that short area usage for David Njoku, is he had that robust red zone role. So I think Elijah Moore is probably off my radar, but I really do like Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman here.
Yeah, I'm just waiting on seeing some weather because I have kind of like the foundation of my player pool, and I've got Jameis right now hanging on the outside, just waiting to see if we're gonna get an opportunity to play him.
Pull that trigger. All right, man. We're at the end again. This is the out the door, the vomit inducing. Where are we looking for that hidden upside?
Yeah, I would say maybe the one spot that goes overlooked that kind of hit upon it is Colts Broncos. It's a game that still projects to have a lot of plays. With Bo Nix, it's literally been, is he facing an opponent that can pressure the quarterback or not? That's steered all his big games, and he's not this week. He's facing a team that's 26th in pressure rate, and without pressure, the Colts are 30th in completion rate, 21st in yards per pass attempt allowed. So I do think that, Broncos could go overlooked this week. We know we've got a Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton, ironically, has turned into like Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Broncos.
Yeah.
He used to be like this volatile, like we talked about Calvin Ridley earlier in the show. That was like the archetype that Courtland Sutton was regarded in. And now he's got 6 or more catches in 6 straight games. Since he had that 0 target game in New Orleans, he's wide receiver 8 in target share, wide receiver 4 in air yard share, wide receiver 7 in yards per out run. His worst game is 7 for 78 over that stretch. So he becomes in play. And then we hit upon like Downs becomes like the wild card, I think, in his price range, because he comes inherently volatile with Anthony Richardson, but we have seen him in his past 4 games with Anthony Richardson have 2 spike weeks as well. So something little small with the Broncos Colts game is definitely on my radar.
Yeah, I like that. I mentioned him once earlier in the show, but Stone Smart might be an interesting way to get some of these top end stacks. The primary reason why he has, in my opinion, some viability this week is, as you mentioned earlier, there are only 3 tight ends up top that can really put the slate out of reach. As far as salary goes and player pricing, it is legit only Trey McBride, Travis Kelce, Jonnu Smith. We might not get David Njoku. So when that is the case, you need fewer guys. Fewer guys have a shot on goal to put the slate out of reach. And now you start bringing in some of these value guys. And he is probably the ultimate value guy on the slate. We have a Chargers team that is without Hayden Hurst. We have Will Dissly, who is doubtful. So we're likely to see what's his name? Tucker Fisk.
Yeah, Tucker Fisk.
Be like the blocking tight end, and Stone Smart be the guy that is out in a route. We also have, it's a matchup against the Bucs. We know the Chargers have been passing more frequently of late, and we have some uncertainty with Ladd McConkey. So everything kind of lines up to potentially give him some viability here. What are your feelings on Mr. Stone Smart?
Yeah, I mean, you know what you're signing up for. Obviously, we have kind of the wild card if Ladd McConkey were to come back as well. Like, how does he fit? But I mean, you laid out the case. And the Chargers, the Buccaneers will be out without Antoine Winfield in this game too. So you've got that going for you. And since they've gotten Jameel Dean and Zion McCollum back, and this has been the case the whole season, they have been really tough on outside receivers. So I would expect things to be funneled through to McConkey and the tight ends, middle of the field stuff against this Bucs defense. I think they have a linebacker out too this week. So I think it's a middle of the field attack game for the Chargers when they do throw. So Smart gets on the board. I got one more ugly one too.
Yes.
Aaron Rodgers double stacks.
Ooh, doggy, that is spicy. Let's go.
I
give me an elevator pitch on it.
Yeah, I mean, so you probably are without Breece Hall again. And although the backfield was more productive, I think, than led on last week. I mean, they didn't really run the ball great. We saw some catches, but it's still, we've got this small opportunity share or target tree for these guys, Adams and Wilson, combining since they've acquired Devontae Adams. They have 56% of the team targets between the two. And they're facing this Jaguars team that basically oscillates between cover 1 and cover 2 based on who knows what, right? Like kind of,
right.
We've talked about this a few times. And both these guys have great splits against cover 1, a little bit edge of cover 2 to Devontae Adams, but we know where the ball's going. It is a Jaguars team that I still think the Jets are playing to try, and I don't believe that for the Jaguars. So I do think that is one that I'm toying around with still too. Aaron Rodgers doubles.
Okay. I'll let that one go.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't hate it. But yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right, man. Week 15, this Search for Ceiling is in the books. As always, head on over to 1 Week Season, get signed up for Inner Circle. That'll get you access to all the theoretical banter that we got each week. And head on over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Use code TAKE25. That'll get you access to everything that they got over there at a 25% discount, including all the stuff that Rich has over there. Until next week, y'all. And we're going to run this. We're going to run the show all the way through week 18. Don't know about the playoffs yet. We will get back to you once we work that out. But we will be here each Friday through the end of the regular season. And until next week, we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards. Peace.
1 Week Season.